course, maybe at the start we need to follow an idea, but eventually we just need to love. Love practice. Nice to be here. Nice to see all of you. Just going to spend a moment taking all of you in. When I've been here before, we've had a different arrangement where I've sat over there and the shrine's been over there, so it's quite a different, it's like a different room. Yeah, it's nice to see all of you. Yeah, so when my Shinara asked if I would come and speak today, I had this idea that, rather than evoking the Buddha's death directly, I thought I could just tell 3 vignettes from the Buddha's life, which kind of works up to his death, but they're vignettes about death. So I'm really, really glad that Amar Pushpa said something about the actual death moment of the Buddha, because I probably won't say very much. There are tons of really, really good talks on Free Buddhist Audio about what might have happened on the day. So if you're interested in what happened and all the different states, meditative states that the Buddha went through, leading up to the moment of death, have a look online. I'm not going to cover it today because I wanted to tell you 3 stories that are important to me, I guess. Yeah. So at some point we will do a little reflection as well. There's a little bit of audience participation in this talk. But I'll start off with a quarrel. Yeah? So we start off with a quarrel, and this quarrel takes place at a monastery. So I think what happened during the time of the Buddha, there weren't sort of established monasteries, but there were sort of groups. There were groups of, the disciples lived in spiritual communities. They wandered and taught people, but they also lived in spiritual communities, sometimes for quite a long time, sometimes for a short time, usually about 3 months. And this particular group of the Buddhist disciples were staying in a place called Savatthi. And, as sometimes happens in residential groups, a couple of factions formed. So the commentaries to the discourses, to the early discourses, tells the story of what exactly happened in the quarrel. I don't think it's that important, except to say that it was about a technicality. It was about a technicality about whether the water jug was emptied or not emptied in the latrine. Yeah? And there was a bit of a dispute over who did what or who didn't do what. Yeah? So it was a little technicality. There were rules, and the rules weren't followed, and then there was a quarrel, there was a dispute. And it wasn't just that there was a dispute between 2 people, the whole community got involved. So about 500 of them, each of them taking sides in the dispute. Yeah? So 2 groups formed, there was factions, and they quarreled all the time. So the Buddha got wind of this, and he did his best to try to sort it out. He asked his disciples to come and see him. He talked to them. He encouraged them. He encouraged them to reflect on the Dharma. He tried to get them to resolve their conflict. Yeah, he tried to get them to resolve their conflict, but they didn't. Yeah. So even when their teacher called them, even when their teacher tried to teach them, they did not resolve their conflict. So this went on, the dispute went on, and then the Buddha decided, I've had enough. Yeah? Why am I living in a community that's riven with conflict, that's not in harmony? I don't want to be around this. I'm going to go up into the forest and retreat there. Have a meditation retreat there. And then there's this lovely detail, a little bit like the detail with the cat that we heard just now. There's this detail that the Buddha was waited on by an elephant called Palileya. So instead of the monks serving the Buddha, there was this elephant that kept the Buddha watered, that brought drinking water but also washing water to the Buddha, looked after the Buddha and attended upon the Buddha whilst he was alone in this forest. So the Buddha left this community that's riven with quarrels. And then, even then, these two groups of disciples did not resolve their conflict. The thing that actually resolved the conflict was that the lay disciples stopped feeding them. Yeah? So the Buddhist disciples, his community, would often wander into the villages and beg for alms. And when the lay disciples realized that these monks weren't getting along with each other, and they were not getting along with each other so much so that the Buddha had left and was no longer teaching in their vicinity, they just thought, why are we supporting them? So they stopped. And that was what helped the monks resolve the conflict. So they resolved the conflict, hoping that the disciples would then start feeding them again. The lay followers would start feeding them again. But actually, the lay followers were quite good. They said, well, have you told the Buddha and have you asked him for his forgiveness? But of course, the Buddha was on retreat. And it was also the rainy season, so the monks couldn't actually travel to go and see the Buddha and ask for his forgiveness. So they said to the lay followers, no, we haven't. No, we haven't, and we can't. And the lay followers said, well, we're not going to start feeding you until you've done that. So they had this 3 months rains retreat with not very much food at all. I like to imagine that actually really, really helped them. That if you're on a retreat together for 3 months and there's not very much food, not very much clothing, and it's raining all the time, I imagine you would actually have to pull together as a community. Anyway, at the end of the rains, these 500 monks did go and see the Buddha and asked the Buddha to come back to this place near Savatthi, and the Buddha did. And they asked the Buddha for forgiveness, and they told Buddha that they had resolved their conflict, they had resolved their dispute. And he did give them a teaching. he did give them a teaching, and the Buddha told them to remember that they must all die. They will die. All of them will die. And that they must stop their quarrels and stop acting as if that they would never die. Yeah. So this is recorded in quite a famous verse in the Dhammapada. Others do not realize that we are all headed for death. Those who realize this will compose their quarrels. Yeah. People have heard this before? Across this verse? Yeah, so that's the background to that verse. I really like looking up the Pali for these little sayings, and particularly looking into the meaning of the words. Medaga, which is what's translated as quarrel, it's also has other translations, which is strife, abusive speech, and scolding. Yeah, strife, abusive speech, and scolding. And samanti, which is what Bhante, our teacher, has translated as compose, means to stop, to cease, to calm, to appease, to rest, to suppress, and to stop. It also appears in the previous verse, not by hatreds ever pacified in the world. So It's also translated as pacified, samanti. So I really like this story because, like, all of us get ourselves into conflict. Little conflicts where somebody does something very small that we just don't like. They leave their, I don't know, you name it, shoes, coats, plates, something in a place that we just don't think it should be there, and then there's a kind of little contraction, a little I don't like that. Or they might say something, or they might just bump into us on the tube. We get into these little conflicts all the time. And that's not the only thing that happens. We hold on. We hold on to our end of the conflict, not realizing that that's not what life is about. That's not what life is for. So I thought what we could do is just for a moment get back into meditation position, and then I'm going to ask you to bring to mind a situation in which you're in conflict with somebody else. So not in conflict with yourself, but in conflict with somebody else. Yeah, so before we do that, you might want to spend a few moments warming your heart, warming your minds with metta. However you find yourself now, bringing an attitude, bringing a stance of loving kindness. Appreciating yourself, appreciating your own good qualities. And then bringing to mind a situation in which you're in conflict with somebody else. So bringing the situation vividly to mind. And then reflect that death can come at any point. They won't live forever, and neither will we. You might even want to imagine the other person dying and what might arise in dependence on that. As a way of bringing a broader perspective. Or you might imagine yourself. What might arise in dependence on that? And if the reflection has brought about a hardening of your heart, that's okay. Just see if you can notice how that actually feels. And then letting the reflection go, coming back to generating metta. And then drawing the meditation to a close. So you can open your eyes when you're ready. So what did you notice during that reflection? This is the audience participation bit.
I noticed that it seemed a bit ridiculous. I felt a bit ridiculous.
You felt ridiculous.
Yeah. In the light of the broader perspective.
Yeah.
There's something ridiculous about holding on to.
Yeah.
Whatever I was holding on to.
Yeah. Yeah. So our resentments, our sort of I'm right, you're wrong, kind of righteous indignation or whatever it is, feels ridiculous. Yeah. Good. Great. Yeah.
I was going to say, with the death reflection, kind of wanting to cherish the relationship. Like went from kind of, just that kind of resentment, so just really wanting to cherish the kind of how amazing the fact that the relationship exists in the first place.
Yes, coming back to what's actually of value. Yeah, great. What's your name?
Daniel.
Daniel. Great. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. Tanya.
Yeah.
I
noticed I felt so relaxed I couldn't be bothered to think about the argument.
Ah.
Because my mind and my body was so relaxed from meditating. I was like, this is just pointless.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are states that are more comfortable. Yeah, more enjoyable than an argumentative state.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
I think it just took me back to a real sense of humanness, like seeing really kind of in relation to kind of more connection rather than like seeing them for their differences with me. It was like actually through similarities rather than what divides us.
Yeah. Kind of sense of common humanity, a shared humanity. Yes. Yeah. Very good. I really like your use of the word connection. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. Oh.
I was just going to say, life's too short.
Life's too short.
Yeah.
A sense of a tangible sense of impermanence. Yeah.
Total. And also just how everything can transform.
Can what?
Everything can transform so quickly.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, things can change quickly. Yeah, we often don't have that perspective. Very, very often we take things very solid and abiding. Yeah. Yeah, always and never. You're always like this. You never do that.
Well, it's a terrible one.
Yeah. What's your name?
Eloise.
Eloise. Yeah, great. You?
I was going to say, we've got like a similar sense of sort of, I don't know, floor falling away and just realising how ridiculous it was.
Yeah.
But then, after that, kind of the argument came back.
Oh, yes.
Part of me, there was a sense of like, maybe that is an important argument to have, but like, not to hold that resentment with it. Like sometimes you do have to maybe stick up for yourself or whatever. You don't necessarily have to hold on to kind of like the anger and the resentment.
Yeah. I think very often the anger and resentment can stop us from being able to say things and put our point across. Like it's almost like we're too angry to even be able to communicate effectively. Yeah, good. Yeah?
I was just going to say, kind of further to the point about life's too short, it feels to me like, you miss an opportunity to be loving and then they're dead, It's kind of, it sometimes feels that simple to me.
Yeah.
And that's how I would want to be. If I knew that someone was about to die, then I would want to be loving in that situation. So surely then that's how I should be wanting to be all the time. Not so easy, but
Yeah. It's hard to keep that perspective. Yeah. And I guess what the Buddha is trying to say is that that we need to live with this perspective. Reflecting that death can come at any point does broaden it gives us a broader perspective on life. We sort of don't get so caught up in the solidity of the detail, or the seeming solidity of the detail. Okay, so that was the first vignette. Thank you. That was a good set of responses. The second story I want to tell you might be one that you're quite familiar with. It's about a bhikkhuni, so a nun, called Kisagotami. So this was before she met the Buddha. She was a mother. Actually, Kisagotami's story is a rather sad story, really. Her name, Gotami, I think it's Gotami's a bit like a family name. Yeah, it's a little bit like a family name. And the word Kisa means thin, scrawny, or haggard. Yeah. Bhikkhu Bodhi, in his book, The Great Disciples of the Buddha, says, "One might truly say of her, her beauty was an inner one. One could not see it spark outside." Very pointed. She wasn't really unattractive. She was also very, very poor. Yeah. So she was very poor. She came from a very poor family. And because of this, it was very, very difficult for her to find a husband. And this was, 2,500, 2,600 years ago, where not being married was very difficult for women. But one day, it so happened that there was a rich merchant, and he saw her inner beauty, saw her inner qualities, and considered it more important than her appearance. And because he was rich and wealthy, didn't mind that she had no money and no wealth and no family connections at all. So he married her, but his family, who they then lived with, his family did not accept her. Yeah, they looked down upon her because she was poor, and they looked down on her because she was unattractive. So even though she was married to a wealthy man, she had no status and no standing in that family. And it was in those times when family is really everything for a woman. So despite finding a husband, she was still very, very unhappy, still had a very difficult life. But one day, she fell pregnant and, fortunately, gave birth to a boy. Again, in that, you have to imagine that this is a society in which boys are very, very valued. Still in India today, boys are very valued over girls. But in those times, even more so. So suddenly, her standing in the family went up. Yeah, so she was suddenly important because she was mother to a son, mother to an heir. So she was happy and contented, but her baby fell sick. And try as she might to nurse him, to look after him, he died. And it was too much for her. She couldn't actually see, she couldn't, not just see, but maybe even couldn't accept that her baby boy, who she loved so much and also depended upon for her happiness, had died. And she went a bit mad, I suppose. She told herself, he hasn't died, he's just sleeping, he's just sick. So she went from person to person asking for medicine for her baby. And they would look at her baby and just know that that baby's dead. Why is she asking for medicine? And she did that for quite a long time, holding this dead baby in her arms, going from person to person, house to house, roaming around the village, asking for medicine. I don't know whether you've been in contact with people who are sort of obviously mentally unstable. That can often be this kind of fear response. I don't want to be around that. It can be a little bit as if, especially I think in traditional societies, like misfortune is contagious. So people sort of withdrew from her. I imagine that people weren't even particularly kind to her. They were frightened of her, and frightened of her madness, and frightened of that dead baby. Luckily for her, though, she came across a disciple of the Buddha, and he looked at her, listened to her, and he said, I think there is somebody who can help you. I think there is somebody who can help you. He's a Buddha, and he's quite close by. He's only staying at the edge of the forest. Why don't you go and see him? So Kisa Gautami went to the Buddha. She immediately, hurried there. And when she walked into the assembly, she just had this sense of hope. And she said to the Buddha, give me medicine for my son. And the Buddha looked at her with really, really kindly eyes. And he said, yes, I can give you medicine for your son. I can give you medicine for your son. I do know something that will help, but you will need to go and find it. Yeah? So of course, she just said, yes, I'll do that. Anything. Tell me what it is. And he said, I need a mustard seed. And she got very, very excited because mustard seeds are a common spice. Every household would have mustard seeds. So she was about to go off to go and get the mustard seeds, and he said, wait. But the mustard seed needs to come from a household where no one has died. Yeah? So that was the condition. I need a mustard seed from a household where no one has died. So Kisagotami goes off with Snow still holding her dead baby in her arms. She knocks on the door of the first house, and she asks for a mustard seed. And the person who answers says, of course you can have a mustard seed. But then she remembers the Buddha's condition, and she just says, has anyone died? And the person says, oh, do not talk to me about death. And starts telling her about how the last year so-and-so in the family has died. And then the year before, this other person has died. So Kisagotami leaves the house, a little bit dejected. But then there's the next house, and they'll surely have mustard seeds. So she knocks on the next door, asks for a mustard seed, and then the person says, yes, of course. And then she asks, has anyone died in this house? And then they tell her, so-and-so died. This was the cause. Such and such a person died. That was the cause. And this keeps happening. She goes from house to house, asking for a mustard seed, listening to stories of death. So towards the evening, she finally realizes that she's not the only person who has to face, she's not the only person to face the death of someone she's loved, someone who brought meaning to her life. And she finally realizes and accepts that her baby has died. So she goes to the burial ground on the edge of the village and buries her baby. And then she walks back to where the Buddha is staying, and she says to him, yes, the mustard seed has done its work. And then she follows it up with something else. Done is the work of the mustard seed. The only thing left to do is to go for refuge. Which means that she wanted to become a follower of the Buddha. So that's what she did. In the face of a deep seeing of the human condition, that death follows life, she makes a commitment. She makes a commitment to live a Dharma life, to live a spiritual life, to live a life where she looks for answers, does what's most important to her. So, if the first story was of composing one's quarrels in the face of death, I think Kisagotami's story is trying to ask us, trying to tell us that in the face of death, you have to commit. Well, you don't have to, but you can. Yeah. You can just commit. You can just commit. She does. When I was thinking about the story of Kisagotami, I was thinking about why is it that we don't really commit. We don't commit to living our fullest potential, don't commit to living a life on the basis of our values. And I say this partly talking to myself, despite deciding to get ordained and having gotten ordained and all that. And I think there's lots and lots of reasons. You all have your reasons about commitment. Sometimes it's healthy skepticism, just having questions and wanting to find out more. Sometimes it's we just want to keep things a bit vague, kind of like being neither here nor there for a little bit. But the thing I was thinking probably plagues most of us, a lot of people who live in London, I think, is what in the Buddhist time was called kama-rama, which is fondness for activity. Yeah? Do people recognize this? It's kind of like busyness. So it's like the busyness of hours of day-to-day mundane life that stops us from committing more deeply, searching more deeply, seeking more deeply. The Buddha had many, many disciples, not just people who followed him full time, like the Kosambi monks or Kisagotami after the death of her son. He also had followers who were merchants, kings, even kings of gods. And very, very often, when a king or Saka, who was the king of gods, would visit the Buddha, they would have this dialogue, and it would conclude with the stock phrase where the king says to the Buddha, "Very good, sir. Now I must depart. I am busy and have a lot to do." Yeah? So I am busy and have a lot to do. I'm busy and have much to do. And the Buddha will answer with a stock phrase, which is, "Do what you think it is time for." Yeah? So I wonder, whether we might not actually say those words, "I am busy and have much to do," but we live like that. We live like that. Okay. The other thought I had about commitment was that I think very often we lack clarity about what the goal is, and lack clarity on how to get there. I think one of the things that stops commitment is that we don't have sometimes we might not have a very, very positive sense of the goal, and it can feel like, if I really commit to awakening in this life, it would mean having to get rid or cut off parts of myself that I quite like, like the kind of fun, sexy, passionate or slightly messy bits of myself that kind of quite like, even if it doesn't really work. Like, I'm going to have to give up swearing or being sarcastic or taking lots of drugs and having a good time. And we just don't really want to let go of these things yet. And sometimes we might need to, but I think most of the time what we need to do is to cultivate this sense that it isn't really about cutting off parts of ourselves. Actually, it's much more about following a kind of natural responsiveness, a kind of like growing in natural responsiveness to goodness. So we become more sensitive, actually. Kisagotami, past her sort of attainment of enlightenment, does have this interesting conversation with Mara, this sort of personification of evil that's recorded in one of the Nikayas. Mara says, "Why now, when you've lost your son, do you sit alone with a tearful face? Having entered the woods all alone, are you on the lookout for a man?" So it's quite interesting, because like Kisagotami wanted to get married for a very, very long time and wanted to have a son for a very, very long time. So Mara really knows her buttons. In fact, Mara knows our buttons, And Kisagotami says, "I have gotten past the death of sons. With this, the search for men has ended. I do not sorrow, I do not weep, nor do I fear you, friend. Delight in craving and hankering has been destroyed. The mass of darkness has been sundered. Having conquered the mighty army of death, I dwell without defiling taints. The thing that I really like about this response is that Kisagotami talks about going beyond. Yeah, so going beyond is quite different from cutting off. You know, sometimes when I teach the Metabhav and I talk about going beyond preferences, not that we might not have preferences, it's just that they don't matter. They don't matter in a small and narrow way. So it's about going beyond craving, going beyond hankering. And when we are able to do so, we go beyond sorrow, go beyond lamentation, go beyond distress. So when we're in state of craving, hankering, anger, you probably even noticed that this in the reflection that we did. When we're in those states, our mind narrows and contracts. Did you feel that when you brought the conflict to mind? The mind just narrows and contracts. And then from these states comes suffering. But if we can just even broaden our perspective a little bit, hold craving, hankering, irritation, anger in more fullness of experience, and that to that extent we've actually gone beyond it. You know? I think we also need to trust. We need to trust that really, if we let go of the surface of our minds, there is depth. I think very, very often we don't. Sometimes when we get into these craving, hankering states, it can feel quite difficult to let go of the sort of superficial layer of mind. I teach meditation to people, but mainly I just talk to them. And sometimes people talk to me about how they can't go to sleep without listening to a podcast, or they can't really sit on the tube without playing on their phones, or we're just sort of so addicted to the surface of our minds. But actually, we can trust that all of us are capable of depth. Every one of us is capable of depth. Okay, I just want to say one more point about commitment, which is that it's really difficult to commit to an idea for a long time. So much more than committing to the Dharma path, if that's what we want to do, is that we need to love practice. We need to love our Dharma lives. Vasantra, who is one of my meditation teachers, he's got this phrase that he says quite often, which is, we need to... Sorry, let me just start again. He says, the task of awakening involves learning to love awareness much more than unawareness. Yeah? The task of awakening is to learn to love awareness much more than unawareness. And I take the use of the word awareness here to not just mean present moment awareness, but also awareness of the goal, awareness of a vision for our lives, and also awareness of the Dharma and how things really are. But I think the operative word is love. The operative word needs to be love, actually. At the moment, he's on my mind because I'm on this course with him. It's a little bit like Mitra Study for Order members. His words, not mine. So I'm on this course with him, and I just really enjoy being with him. But mostly I love the sort of quality of mind that he puts me in touch with when he's teaching or when he's leading meditation. Like, really, really love those days and love him. So every 2 weeks for an hour and a half, Monday evenings, with him, and throughout the week I do homework and listen to him, his recorded talks. And recently I've deleted my one and only game from my phone and also Instagram. So like, I know rationally that Instagram rots my mind. It's like actively bad for me. And I couldn't really do anything about it. But now that I'm on the course, because I love this Santra so much, and I really appreciate all the effort that he's putting into me, I just want to respond out of love. And it's not been an issue at all, actually, like deleting Instagram. I thought it would be, but it's been fine. Mostly I just think about how much I'm benefiting and how much more present I can be with the Santra. Now that I'm not sort of scrolling and doom scrolling, and I look at a variety of things, and not just like terrible memes about fake spirituality. Yeah, I also like have like good quality input on Instagram, but I still think it's like brain rot, you know. All right, so we need to, of course, maybe at the start we need to follow an idea, but eventually we just need to love practice. Okay, so the third story I want to tell you comes from the year of the Buddha's death. And it's not the Buddha's death itself, although that's very, very important. Like I said at the start, I really urge you to listen to the talks that sort of describe it, describe the events that lead up to the Buddha's death, how he went on tour with his attendants, the different people he saw, what actually happened on the day and also afterwards. What I wanted to focus on instead was the death of one of his disciples, Sariputta. Mainly because, I'll sort of unpack it first and then tell you the story, because I want to finish with the story. I wanted to tell you the story of Sariputta's death because I feel like it's a story about love. I think it's very easy to, especially these days, conceptualize the goal of Buddhism as understanding the nature of how things are, trying to grapple with reality with a capital R, to understand the deep workings of consciousness, to really, really understand mind and what mind is. These days a lot of people come to Buddhism because of advances in physics, quantum physics, psychology, neuroscience, all of which seem to be giving evidence to the truth of the Buddha's realization. And that's how people come to Buddhism, come to meditation. And I think that's really, really important. And I'm glad that people are able to find contemporary connections with such ancient teachings. And although in other areas of my life I do work to help this happen, to help people make the connections, and I was very, very involved in the Nature of Mind project that ran last year, and some of you were on some of these events. Actually, I think in the final analysis, it's much, much more about love. For me, anyway, it's much, much more about love and being freer of fear and being freer of all the things that stop connection. How we live and how we are with other people. That's what's important. And the Buddha loved, he loved his disciples. And this particular disciple who I want to tell you about, Sariputta, was a spiritual genius. Yeah, he's a spiritual genius in his own right. And sometimes just reading his stories, I do wonder whether he was more, like perhaps even more intellectually developed than the Buddha. I don't know if this is like a slightly heretical thing to say, but he did have this incredible, incredible mind. The Buddha actually comes across in some of the discourses as being quite taciturn. You know, he doesn't sort of elucidate the Dharma a lot all the time. Sometimes he would just sort of say things and then leave his disciples slightly confused. You know, what did he actually mean? And the Buddha, meanwhile, will have retired to his hut. Yeah, and then, you know, and I imagine, I don't know what you're like with your teachers. I imagine they were a bit shy, a bit ashamed to ask. You know, I'm like that with my teachers. You know, sometimes I just think, don't want to ask to embarrass myself. You know. So they would then go to Sariputta, who would elucidate the Buddha's teaching. You know, Sariputta would just explain, expound, explore with them what the Buddha actually meant. He would elaborate and develop the teaching. I think without Sariputta, we probably wouldn't have had this kind of development of the analysis of the Dharma. You know, Dharmic truths, different kinds of mental events, different lists, and all that. So, without Sariputta, probably no Abhidharma, no Yogacara, no Mahamudra, no Dzogchen. You know, like none of these sort of practices that then developed. So, in this story that I want to tell you, what we have is a meeting of two great minds, and the Buddha really, really loves Sariputta. He wasn't at all threatened by Sariputta's intellect, and it sounds like Sariputta wasn't either. The Buddha often praised Sariputta, seemingly for no reason at all. He would just speak words of love. And for me, what's not interesting is that the Buddha said these words of love, but that they were recorded, that they were important. Somebody thought it was important enough to record. In the Devaputta Samyutta, there's this lovely, gorgeous story where the Buddha is attended upon by his friend Ananda, and the Buddha just sort of says to Ananda, do you approve of Sariputta? And Ananda says, who would not approve of Sariputta unless he was foolish, full of hatred, and mentally deranged? And the two of them just go on like that, you know, like sort of expelling Sariputta's virtues. And then these passing spirits, these passing devas, get so happy and excited from listening to the Buddha and Ananda, you know, expounding Sariputta's good qualities, that they start to light up the grove, the forest grove in which the Buddha and Ananda are sitting in. And then the rest of the story is just a description of all the different colors that the spirits light up the grove in, you know, turquoise and beryl and ruby, and you know, it just goes on for quite a bit. Yeah. So I think when it comes down to it, it's really simple. You know, we can talk about the end of suffering, impermanence, the different sort of list of fetters, or I don't know. But I think what's most important is how we relate to each other, and how much depth of love there can be when we're free of fear, of craving, of hatred, and of delusion. And I think it's really that simple. So let me tell you the story. So it was in the Buddha's last year where he was on tour. He knew he was going to die, and the Buddha decided that he would visit all his disciples, walk around the area that he did pretty much the whole of his life after his enlightenment, and just to make sure that everyone really understood his teaching. And as the Buddha was walking around, Sariputta, he came to this place close to where Sariputta was living at that time. Sariputta, was a great teacher in his own right, had his own sort of group of monks he was teaching. And Sariputta knew that the Buddha was close, and he himself entered his own reflection, his own meditation on the fruits of enlightenment. And afterwards, this thought came to him: who will die first? Will I die first, or will the Buddha die first? And because he was a highly realized being, he knew that he had only a very, very short time to live. In the story it says a week, so we can just go with that. He knew he only had a week to live. And then he reflected on what he wanted to do, knowing that he only had a week to live. And he realized that what he wanted to do was to go and see his mother. So Sariputta wanted to go and see his mother before he died. His mother does sound like a very, very difficult woman. The name Sariputta means son of Sari. His mother was called Rupasari. And Rupasari was quite, it sounds bad actually. Whenever, she had 7 children who were monks and nuns. And whenever they were in the vicinity of her village, she was quite a wealthy woman. But whenever her children who were followers of the Buddha were in the vicinity of the village, she would give them alms, so she would give them food, but she would also harangue them. She would scold them for leaving the household life. She definitely did not approve of her children's life choices, and was extremely vocal about it, and she'd tell everyone how much she disapproved. And Sariputta wanted to, before his death, go and see her. Yeah? And he decided that before he would go and see his mother one last time, he would take his leave of the Buddha. So the Buddha was quite close by, and Sariputta went to see this Buddha and said, soon I will attain final nirvana, so I will attain Parinirvana. I want to go and see my mother. Yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to go back to where I was born, and that is where I will die. The Buddha didn't say very much in response to Sariputta, but he did make a request. He said, after you die, this assembly of monks and nuns and lay people will not hear the Dharma so well expounded. So before you go, give us a Dharma teaching. So that's what Sariputta does. Sariputta expounds the Dharma, gives this great, big, long teaching. And at the end of his Dharma teaching, he falls onto his knees and he wraps his arms around the Buddha's legs. And then he says something very, very beautiful. I hope I've got it. If I want to read it to you, it's so beautiful. He says, so he's embraced the Buddha's legs, and he says, so that I might worship these feet, I have fulfilled the 10 perfections throughout an incalculable period. My heart's wish has found fulfillment. I don't know why I find that so moving, but so that I might worship these feet, I have fulfilled the 10 perfections. My heart's wish has found fulfillment. And then what he goes on to do is that he asks the Buddha for forgiveness. And what the Buddha says to him is, I forgive you. I forgive you, Sariputta. There is not a single word or deed of yours that was displeasing to me. Do now what you think is time for. So in the face of death, Sariputta asked the Buddha for forgiveness, and the Buddha forgives him. And then Sariputta gets up. He does this very traditional thing where he walks around the Buddha 3 times. And then, without turning his back to the Buddha, he just walks backwards for a long, long, long time until he cannot see the Buddha anymore. And still, he continues to walk backwards. And I just think it's that simple. It's that simple. It's about love, like great love between people.
Great, so I hope you enjoyed that Dharma talk. So if you did enjoy it, if you're enjoying our videos, I just want to ask you or encourage you to think about making a donation to the Brixton Buddhist Community. We're a UK charity that relies completely on your donations to run everything here. And if this was a class, a meditation class, there'd be a donation bowl that you could just put in £10 at the end of the night to help support the activities. But as you're watching this online, I just want to ask you to think about making an online donation. If you've watched 4 or 5 videos this month, maybe you might want to think about giving £10. So there's a link in the description below where you can go to our website and make a donation. And if you want to keep giving, you don't want to worry about making that donation every month, well, you could just set up a standing order, a monthly standing order. That would be really, really helpful. I want to suggest something of the region of maybe £10 or £20 a month if you're able to do that, and that would be really, really helpful and help us keep producing videos like this one. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourself.